There is a strange sickness in the modern world. Everything must fit into a category. Every person must be labeled. Every belief must belong to a side. Every disagreement becomes a declaration of loyalty or betrayal. And the more people do this, the less capable they become of actual discernment. Modern people increasingly judge one another through categories before they ever judge one another through conduct. Political labels, social labels, racial labels, ideological labels. Once that label is applied, well, many people stop looking any deeper. But that's not wisdom. It is intellectual laziness disguised as certainty. Within Theodish thought, there is a concept called Thew. And Thew is difficult to explain to modern people because modern people are used to rigid systems. They're used to codified law. They are used to institutions trying to create universal rules for every possible circumstance. But Thew is not merely law. It is certainly not rigid doctrine. It is not ideological programming. Thew is living custom. It is inherited expectation, communal understanding, relationship, responsibility, accumulated wisdom carried across generations, and most importantly, Thew is living. A codified system can function mechanically, but living Thew requires discernment. It requires wisdom. It requires people capable of judging circumstance while remaining rooted within a stable worldview. And that distinction matters because modern people often mistake rigidity for strength. But systems that cannot adapt, they will eventually shatter. A tree that bends in the storm will survive. However, one that refuses to move at all often breaks. Our ancestors survived because they adapted. Their worldview remained rooted, but its expression, well, that shifted across circumstance, region, generation, and necessity. Different tribes maintain different customs. Different communities interpreted obligation differently. Even the old sagas are filled with disagreement, reinterpretation, negotiation, and competing responsibilities. This was not failure, it was life. I think modern people struggle with this deeply because modern society increasingly trains people to think through abstraction. People become categories before they become human beings. Nuance just disappears. Complexity disappears. Individual conduct disappears. A person may be judged entirely through skin color before character is ever examined. Another may be judged entirely through a political affiliation before his deeds are even considered. Another may be accepted or rejected entirely because of ideological labeling, without asking anyone whether that person actually contributes to the people around them. And the result? Well, that's a society that becomes less discerning the more that it categorizes. Within a living tribal worldview, belonging is not merely theoretical. It is relational. It is proven. It is reinforced through loyalty, through trust, through contribution, responsibility, and participation within the life of the tribe. A tribe is not merely a collection of people who physically resemble one another. A tribe is a web of reciprocal obligation, of shared memory, of shared struggle, of shared responsibility, and shared worldview. And sacred trust is built over time. This is one of the reasons modern people often misunderstand tribalism entirely. They immediately attempt to reduce it to simplistic racial categories. But skin color alone has never been a sufficient measure of worth, or loyalty, or belonging. There are people tied to us by blood who destroy everything around them. And there are people born far away who become trusted members of a community through years of demonstrated loyalty, demonstrated sacrifice, contribution, and right action. Because in a living worldview, belonging is not merely inherited, it is maintained. Worldviews are rarely transmitted through abstract instruction. None of this means identity or continuity are meaningless. Quite the opposite, in fact. A people without continuity eventually dissolves. A people without shared expectations loses trust. A people without worldview loses direction. But continuity does not require rigidity, and rootedness does not require intellectual imprisonment. Living traditions survive through balance. A worldview must remain rooted strongly enough to preserve identity, to preserve continuity and direction, while still remaining flexible enough to adapt to changing reality without breaking itself. And honestly, even the old stories understood this. The gods themselves resist simplistic categorization. Odin is wisdom and frenzy. He is king and wanderer, seeker and manipulator, all at the same time. The old worldview rarely reduced existence into neat ideological boxes because life itself is layered. Reality is layered. Human beings are layered. Perhaps that is the part of what modern society has forgotten. Discernment requires effort. It requires observation, wisdom, patience, the willingness to judge people through conduct rather than labels. And that is much harder than ideological rigidity, because rigidity is comfortable. It removes the burden of thought. It allows people to sort the world into categories and stop asking questions. But living tradition cannot survive on oversimplification. Healthy tribes cannot survive on oversimplification. Even justice itself cannot survive on oversimplification. The goal of a living worldview is not to trap people inside intellectual cages. The goal is to cultivate people capable of carrying the worldview forward with wisdom, strength, adaptability, and discernment. That is why Thew must remain living. Because once a tradition becomes incapable of adaptation, it ceases to live. Once a people abandons all continuity, all expectation, and all rooted identity, they dissolve into directionless individualism. The challenge is not choosing between rigidity and rootlessness. The challenge is maintaining continuity without becoming inflexible. The balance is not weakness. It is survival. And perhaps more importantly, It is wisdom.